Thank you for watching Amir Shakil 5858. I'm Amir Budnam. Following news have been reported by American, Canadian and European channels. Asian, African channels and news agencies AFP, Reuters and AP have reported the same news. Headlines: Cleanup effort has been started at Baltimore Bridge. Cryptocurrency billionaire have been sentenced for 25 years. Sister of prisoner in Russia. Joe Lieberman story. UN court order Israel. Israeli bombing in Lebanon. Russia arrested 4 suspects in Moscow terrorist attack. Russia used veto power for North Korea. Putin said Ukraine war could expand because of F-16 fighters. On Wall Street, only Nasdaq fell. In Canada, 4 school boards lawsuit against Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat for $4.5 billion. Major baseball league season started. Biden, Obama, Clinton against Trump in Radio City Music Hall in New York. Illinois deadly rampage. Now the news in details.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Al Jazeera has released a video showing Israeli soldiers fatally shooting 2 unarmed Palestinians near Gaza City, then burying their bodies with a bulldozer. One of the men can be seen waving a piece of white fabric before they shoot him dead. Indiscriminate Israeli attacks continue throughout the Gaza Strip Wednesday. Musa Dahir lost his parents in an Israeli airstrike on Rafah.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I can't make sense of what happened. My parents, my father with his displaced friends who came from Gaza near the industrial area and were staying with him. They were all together when suddenly they were all gone like dust. They fled from one death and came to another. If the Security Council issues another resolution, they will hit more. For God's sake, do not pass more resolutions. That's enough. Every time they pass a resolution, they hit us more. We're all dying. My parents last night. We will be tomorrow. Others will follow. We're all on the way to death.
The Israeli raid and siege on Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City is now in its 10th day. The rights group Euromed Human Rights Monitor says at least 13 children have been killed by Israeli forces in and near Al-Shifa since the raid started. Meanwhile, local media is reporting Palestinian journalist Mohammed Abu Sakhil was shot and killed at Al-Shifa hospital. In related news, the Palestine Red Crescent says Israel recently released 7 of its members who were detained on the raid on Al-Amal hospital in February. The health workers, who included the director of ambulance and emergency services in Gaza, spent 47 days in prison. 8 other Red Crescent staffers are still being held. This comes as UNRWA said 171 of its workers have now been killed in Gaza. The death toll there since October 7th has now topped 32,500, including 14,000 children. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed at least 4 Palestinians Wednesday. 3 of them were killed in an overnight air raid.
I started screaming and my nephew was with me. I was calling for an ambulance or a car and calling on the people to come and help us to move bodies from the ground. People came to help because the ambulance was late because the checkpoint was closed. We carried Hamza and he was still breathing, but when we reached the ambulance, he died.
The Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 450 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th. Another 4,700 have been wounded. Over 7,300 have been detained. Also in the occupied West Bank, the Israeli human rights group Looking the Occupation in the Eye said a shooting attack on a highway near the town of Al-Auja injured 2 of its activists. They were reportedly on their way to help Palestinian shepherds. A 13-year-old Israeli boy was also injured. Here in the U.S., another State Department official has publicly resigned over the Biden administration's support for Israel. Anel Shilein was a foreign affairs officer in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor who focused on promoting human rights in the Middle East and North Africa. In a piece for CNN, she writes, quote, "Whatever credibility the United States had as an advocate for human rights has almost entirely vanished since the war began." Anel Shilein will be joining us later in the broadcast. The president of the Center for American Progress, Patrick Gaspard, who is also a longtime Democratic insider and former U.S. ambassador to South Africa, blasted the Biden administration's defense of Israel's actions in Gaza. Gaspard's comments came after State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters this week the U.S. believes Israel is complying with international law. And Gaspard said Miller's statement is, quote, "a gross disregard of overwhelming evidence and a dangerous precedent in the conduct of U.S. foreign policy." Meanwhile, the White House says it's working with Israel to reschedule a date for a D.C. visit by an Israeli delegation to discuss the planned invasion of Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had previously canceled the meeting after the U.S. refused to veto a UN Security Council ceasefire resolution. Elsewhere, Ireland says it'll intervene in South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The Irish Foreign Minister, Michael Martin, said Israel's actions in Gaza constitute a, quote, blatant violation of international humanitarian law on a mass scale. In Jordan, police continue to crack down on thousands of protesters who've been demonstrating near the Israeli embassy in Amman for 3 days. Protesters could be heard chanting betrayal as they call on Jordan to cancel its deals with Israel.
Our message has been a message of the Jordanian popular movement since the beginning of October 7th and before that. We are asking the Jordanian government to cancel the Wadi Araba peace treaty with Israel and all its annexes that we believe harm Jordanian national interests. This requires us to stand with the choices of the Palestinian people who are facing an aggression by the Zionist entity, the American administration, and the European West.
In Baltimore, rescue workers recovered the bodies of 2 victims of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. The men were identified as 35-year-old Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, originally from Mexico, and 26-year-old Dorlian Roniel Castillo Cabrera from Guatemala. Another 4 workers are still missing and presumed dead in the river. All 6 victims were immigrant overnight construction workers. The National Transportation Safety Board said the investigation into the cargo ship's collision with the bridge could take 1 to 2 years to complete. President Biden has vowed to direct federal funds to pay for the entire cost of the bridge's reconstruction. In Alabama, a Democrat has flipped a seat in the state legislature after running on abortion rights and preserving access to IVF, in vitro fertilization, in what Democrats hope is a bellwether ahead of November. Marilyn Land said of her victory, quote, "Alabama women and families sent a clear message that will be heard in Montgomery and across the nation. Our legislature must repeal Alabama's no exceptions abortion ban, fully restore access to IVF, and protect the right to contraception," she said. Voting rights advocates in Pennsylvania are expressing alarm after a federal appeals court ruled undated mail-in ballots should not be counted even if they arrive on time. The ACLU said this could result in thousands of Pennsylvania voters losing their votes. The Republican National Committee praised the ruling. Meanwhile, Montana, the state Supreme Court has struck down 4 Republican laws aimed at restricting the vote, including one which would have largely ended same-day voter registration. The 3 white men who chased down and killed Ahmaud Arbery in 2020 asked a federal appeals court Wednesday to toss out their hate crimes convictions. The 3 convicted murderers say prosecutors did not prove they targeted Arbery, who they shot and killed while he was out for a jog because he was black. During the trial of William Bryan, father and son Greg and Travis McMichael, prosecutors shared dozens of racist text messages and social media posts from the men in the months and years before the murder of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud's father, Marcus Arbery, responded to the news Wednesday.
The evidence just too strong for this old man. I don't care what them lawyers said. The evidence was just too strong. And me and my family, we just had to be strong and just sit back. We know everything all right. Because I'm telling you, the evidence was just too strong against those 3 men.
Donald Trump lashed out at New York Judge Juan Merchan and the judge's daughter just hours after the judge imposed a gag order on Trump ahead of his criminal hush money trial next month. On his Truth Social platform, Trump called Judge Merchan a hater and accused him of being biased and conflicted. In response to the partial gag order, Trump claimed Merchan was, quote, "wrongfully attempting to deprive me of my First Amendment right to speak out against the weaponization of law enforcement," unquote. The gag order does not technically shield Merchan from public statements by Trump. Former Connecticut Senator and vice presidential candidate Joe Lieberman has died at the age of 82 after a fall. Lieberman was a leading backer of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. He also helped kill the public option in the Affordable Care Act and fought efforts to expand Medicare eligibility. In 2000, he became the first Jewish vice presidential nominee on a major party ticket when he ran as Al Gore's running mate. In 2008, he endorsed Republican Senator John McCain for president over Barack Obama. In his memoir, McCain said he was sorry he didn't choose Lieberman as his vice presidential running mate over Sarah Palin. The Phoenix City Council has approved a new ordinance to protect many workers from extreme heat. Phoenix is the hottest city in the country. Contractors working with the city will be required to provide cooling breaks, cold water, and air conditioning. Meanwhile, in Florida, the Republican-led state legislature recently passed a bill barring municipalities in Florida from adopting any local measures to protect workers from extreme heat. In Argentina, a court has convicted 11 former officials of crimes against humanity for committing atrocities against over 600 people during the military dictatorship that ruled Argentina from 1976 to 83. The victims included transgender women, high school students, prisoners who gave birth in captivity and whose babies were taken from them. The court ruled the former military, police, and government officials were involved in forced disappearances, torture, rape, and murder at secret torture centers on the outskirts of Buenos Aires. On Sunday, thousands of Argentines gathered in Buenos Aires to remember the victims of the military dictatorship.
Today, some families here in Argentina are still searching for their children. The idea is that every March 24th, we should remember that date so we don't repeat those mistakes. A people that has a memory does not repeat those mistakes.
This all comes as Argentina's new far-right president Javier Milei faces renewed criticism for downplaying dictatorship-era atrocities. In Indonesia, 13 soldiers have been arrested after video emerged showing them torturing a man at a military outpost in West Papua. The Indonesian military also issued a rare apology for the incident. According to Amnesty International, the man who was tortured later died. In Russia, the death toll from last week's concert hall attack has risen to 143. Around 80 people remain hospitalized after surviving the worst terror attack in Moscow in decades. The arrest of 4 Tajik nationals has sparked an increase in attacks on Central Asian migrants in Moscow and other cities. The embassy of Tajikistan in Russia has warned its citizens to stay home if possible. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for reparations for the transatlantic slave trade to, quote, help overcome generations of exclusion and discrimination. Guterres made the statement on the UN International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Canadian economists aren't making much fun of Bidenomics anymore. They're thinking maybe it works to build from the middle out and the bottom up.
It is clear that President Biden's economic plan is working to grow the middle class, spur investments in manufacturing.
Turning to Bidenomics, we start from a position of strength. The U.S. economy is in solid shape.
Bidenomics, which is the word of the day, word of the week, word of the month, word of the year here at the White House. Bidenomics.
So Bidenomics is not a word that the White House uses anymore. Last year, summer, they spent $40 million because they thought the numbers were strong. And on the surface, you look at unemployment, you look at GDP, you look at growth, and you say, okay, stock market looks good, let's do it. And it's not working. Where other times people say, you know, they feel a little bit better about the country, even if the numbers aren't as strong as these apparently look. The one thing we don't look at is the debt, and we're paying more in the debt service with the interest rate these high than we are for the entire Defense Department. And we're only raising defense maybe 1 or 2%, which is relatively scary and leaves us way too vulnerable. But that President Biden, if he's going to close the gap, it's not going to be with the economy. He is, according to the recent polls, is treading water without the American people and grading way below Donald Trump and who is better on the economy. So joining us now is Julian Epstein. He serves as chief counsel of the House Judiciary Committee and staff director of the House Oversight Committee for the Democratic Party, 96 to 2001. Julian, welcome back.
Brian, thanks for having me. Good to be back with you.
Hey, Julian, a couple of things. I love the column you wrote about what's going on at the border because you take on what Texas did with SB 4. Now, we know, and we watched almost a week ago today. A week ago today, we watched the National Guard being overwhelmed by illegal immigrants who just ran over them in an effort to get into our country and get to the next fence, and all of them were let in. 9 have been charged with assault. Well, this is all part of the chaos of SB 4, where Texas can arrest you if you come here illegally, and the only way to get out of jail is to leave the country. And SB 4 has been held up in the court system. Where do you stand?
Well, yeah, we had that overrunning of the border agents, and today New York is starting a program to give illegal migrants credit cards, debit cards. So the system, I mean, you could take any one of 20 clips that we've seen in the last month and conclude from that the system is completely out of control, and we have beyond chaos, we have a catastrophe here. This is a catastrophe that is completely of the making of the Biden administration. Biden has the ability to close the border under Section 1182. It's been validated by the Supreme Court. We've seen somewhere between 8 and 10 million illegal crossings under his presidency. The system doesn't have the capacity to handle it when you consider just the inability of 8 to 10 million unassimilated migrants being able to integrate into the system in any meaningful way. Look at what's happening in Europe. It's been a disaster in Europe. There's footage today in Paris of migrants storming law enforcement because they're deporting illegal migrants there. I mean, this is chaotic throughout the entire West. It's something that Biden could fix immediately with a stroke of a pen, and for political reasons, I think they refuse to. They are cowering to the far progressive intersectional left, who believes that in a demented illogic, believes that enforcing immigration laws is racist. And this is where the left has really gone off the deep end. In the Fifth Circuit case, Brian, you and I spoke about this a couple months ago. What the Fifth Circuit did yesterday was to extend the stay of the lower court so that SB 4, which allows Texas to enforce the law on its own, is put on hold, at least until the case is tried on its merits. My guess is this will make it to the Supreme Court. There are really 2 issues that the Supreme Court will cover, will address. One is whether Texas' argument that this is an invasion, whether that's valid, and if it is an invasion under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, I think it is, the Texas has the right to fend off an invasion. So that's the first issue. I'm not sure that Texas will win on that. I'm skeptical that Texas will win on that issue. But there is a second issue that is that I think Texas has a better chance of prevailing on, which is in the 2012 case, the Arizona case, which you and I also covered, I think, in our last conversation. Justice Scalia wrote the dissent. That was a case in which Arizona sought to enforce immigration laws and work permitting through its own local authorities. And the Supreme Court struck down that Arizona statute, saying that enforcement of federal immigration laws was the province of the federal government. Scalia had a very important dissent in that opinion, where he said, so long as the state isn't changing the federal law, but merely supplementing the enforcement of it, then that doesn't offend the Constitution. And so the question there, I think, is whether Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Comey will agree with that. And I think that's an open issue when it gets to the Supreme Court.
But Julian, so I love that. I love when you write in a way in which I can understand the law and the approaches and the strategy. But you talk about what Scalia said in the dissent. He said, look, if their policies back up federal policy, what's the problem? And in this case, it is doing what the federal government should be doing, and that's enforcing the laws that are on the books. And they're so frustrated after 8 million people come in, and they're saying, I've had it. So it's your problem that these policies don't line up, because Texas lines up with how the law is written. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree that this is a disaster, and something has to be done. I mean, this is a perfect example of elite disconnect. That elites think that elites in Washington think that 8 or 10 million migrants isn't any big deal. We're given you're tired, you're poor, you're herd of masses kind of a thing. This sort of really idealized version of immigration in a world in which they don't have to live. You notice when migrants are sent up to Martha's Vineyard or into New York, that's when the liberals start to freak out. So I think Scalia's argument has some possibility of succeeding. More importantly, this is not just a disaster for the country. This is a disaster for Biden politically. 70 to 80% of his voters don't approve. 78% of voters think that Biden has done an abysmal job on immigration and want to see the laws enforced. If you look at black and brown working class voters, they are abandoning the party in droves. They know immigration is driving down their wages. What I propose in the article in the New York Post piece, Brian, is that the administration ought to be sitting down with Governor Abbott.
Yeah, of course.
And ought to be saying, yes, we recognize this is the problem. This is the problem that border states are bearing almost entirely. And this is just unbelievable. Do as I say, not as I do.
But Julian, you have to amend what you said. This is the first time they're not doing it all themselves. They're being bused through these cities, so it's now a nationwide problem. And they can't ignore it, but they want to blame it. I do want to get your take on the move right now to push Fani Willis off this case. The judge is listening to that argument. Who do you think will prevail here, judging by the judge's decision last time to say Nathan Wade had to go?
Well, I think if Fani Willis had any real interest in this case, she would resign or accuse herself from it. This is an utter embarrassment. This looks to me, in my opinion, this was a kickback scheme. where she hired a boyfriend who was then providing her all kinds of benefits. I think the whole claim about the reimbursements is hard to believe. I think the claims about when a relationship began, I think those are very hard to believe. I think the judge was right to allow the Trump team to appeal, and I think there's not just a question about whether she should be kicked off the case. I think there's a question potentially about perjury moving forward that the state could take up, the legislature is going to look into. So I think there is, I mean, just the standard in Georgia is a conflict or the appearance of a conflict, and given that there is a strong appearance that Fannie Lewis had an economic incentive for the case to move forward. I mean, I don't know how you argue this is not an appearance of a conflict.
Julian,
in any case, this is an utter embarrassment for amongst many other embarrassments for the lawfare crowd that is, prosecuting Trump in the 11th hour of this campaign.
Julian Epstein, thanks so much for being fair and balanced. Appreciate it. Julian Epstein,
Thanks for having me again.
You got it.
Bye.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-host Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday.
Tonight, we're 1,200 feet above the wreckage of the Baltimore Bridge collapse.
Thermal images like this one are a force multiplier.
Why the search for the missing is so difficult.
Oh wow, so that's a vehicle.
And on the water, what it will take to reopen the vital port.
It's going to be an enormous amount of work.
Plus, we're learning new details about the construction crew's final moments as the city honors the victims.
Let us join together in a moment of silence.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. We want to begin tonight with the salvage operation underway in Baltimore as federal investigators start piercing together what may have caused that massive cargo ship to lose power before its catastrophic collision with the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Hazardous conditions from broken and twisted pieces of the bridge is forcing divers to pause their efforts to find construction workers who are missing. What became clear is the sheer magnitude of the work that lies ahead, not just to find the victims and clear the port, but to get one of America's busiest ports up and running again. Late this afternoon, the Biden administration approved $60 million in emergency funding to help cover the initial costs of debris removal. Governor Westmore warned residents of the long road ahead when it comes to rebuilding the bridge and returning the port to what it was. The NTSB says the investigation itself could take up to 2 years. CBS's Chris Van Cleve will start us off tonight with a first-hand look at the devastation.
From the water, the scope of the accident is enormous. The cargo ship Dolly is almost as long as the Chrysler Building in New York City is tall. The wreckage sits where it fell early Tuesday morning, blocking access to one of the nation's busiest ports. We're surveying the damage with the commander of the Army Corps of Engineers.
The president called me yesterday and we spoke for a few minutes, and he made it clear this was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' #1 priority.
Will this be an around-the-clock effort?
We're going to go 24/7.
That sounds like a massive effort.
It is a massive effort.
General Scott Spellman's team will work with crews from the Navy and Coast Guard to begin the salvage efforts to clear the waterway and allow divers to recover the remaining 4 bodies believed to be trapped beneath the rubble.
It's not just all this debris that you can see in this massive cargo ship. It's also everything that's sunk to the bottom. Tons of debris that's 50 feet down. It all has to come off the floor before this channel and the Port of Baltimore can reopen.
Already, there is a traffic jam of cargo ships unable to get in or out of the Port of Baltimore, plus 2 cruise ships that won't be able to return to the Charm City port that employs 8,000 people.
This is a core economic engine for our state, and we have to make sure that our workers are protected.
New video shows traffic early Tuesday morning on the Francis Scott Key Bridge and that construction crew filling potholes, moments before the Dolly slammed into it. And now, our first look on board the giant vessel as NTSB investigators work to gather evidence and continue interviews with the ship's 21-person crew. The Dolly's voice data recorder shows about 90 seconds after the first sign of trouble, the onboard pilot called for help, asking nearby tugboats to respond. Less than a minute later, the Mayday call, then the devastating collision. The damage on board is extensive. Part of the bridge came down on the bow, leaving a deep gash. Cargo containers with hazardous material sit sheared open.
When you get out here on the water and you look at that, you really get a sense for the massive effort that we're dealing with.
And that effort requires clearing a 700-foot wide channel to get the port back open. The Navy is bringing in the largest floating crane on the East Coast. It'll be here tonight. It can lift up to 1,000 tons, but they think that piece of bridge laying on the ship weighs 3 or 4 times that, Nora.
Wow. Chris Van Cleve, thank you. Tonight, we're learning more about the final moments of the construction workers who plummeted into the river. A co-worker tells CBS News the crew had finished their work when the ship hit. They were in their cars on a break waiting for the concrete to dry before leaving and reopening the lane. And that's when the bridge collapsed. CBS's Nicole Scanger reports tonight on the search for their bodies.
Baltimore County Police survey the wreckage from 1,200 feet.
Nothing prepares you for a boat colliding into the bridge.
Even after you see it, and it's still just so surreal.
In the hours after the collapse, this thermal imaging technology was used to scour for victims.
That was our main focus that night around 4 a.m. When we first got here, was utilizing the thermal imaging just to try to locate anybody.
Transmitting real-time images like these to those on the ground.
Oh wow, so that's a vehicle.
On Wednesday, Maryland State Police pulled the bodies of Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes and Orlean Castillo Cabrera out of the river. The divers are unable to reach the 4 people still missing.
Because of the amount of concrete and debris, divers are no longer able to safely navigate or operate around that.
Tonight, we're learning more about the victims. The brother of Minor Yasir Suazo Sandoval tells CBS News he wishes he could have stopped his brother from going to work. Moises Diaz was scheduled to fill potholes on the Key Bridge Tuesday, but his shift was changed. Every day, we give thanks to God for life, Diaz tells us. He's grieving the loss of 6 fellow construction workers, men he calls brothers. I saw my friends as family members, and Diaz tells us the miraculous story of his friend Julio Cervantes, one of 2 rescued. He says Cervantes escaped his sinking truck by crawling out the window. He thought, I'm going to die here. Even though he can't swim, he survived.
Diaz tells us Cervantes' chest was crushed during his escape. He's stable now, but even as he recovers physically, his friend says his trauma is his deepest pain, that he can't stop replaying the bridge collapse in his mind. Nora?
Oh, it's a miracle he's alive. Nicole Scanger, thank you.
Now to the downfall of disgraced cryptocurrency mogul Sam Bankman-Fried. The former tech billionaire and FTX founder was sentenced today to 25 years in prison for what prosecutors called one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. CBS's Errol Barnett has details from the courtroom.
The former king of crypto was dressed in a beige jail uniform in a Manhattan federal courtroom today, acknowledging a series of his own bad decisions. Sam Bankman-Fried learned his sentence of 25 years after telling the court, quote, "I am sorry about what happened at every stage." Prosecutors argued the MIT graduate was motivated by greed, bilking unwitting customers out of more than $8 billion before the collapse of FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange he founded. Judge Lewis Kaplan agreed, saying the 32-year-old was remorseless. Sunil Kavuri was one of his victims.
I lost a huge amount of money when FTX collapsed, and how much? $2 million. So, and that was for a family home and for my children's education, and that's overnight.
Bankman-Fried was once hailed as the future of finance, with an estimated net worth of $26 billion, and enlisting celebrities including quarterback Tom Brady and basketball star Steph Curry,
I'm not an expert, and I don't need to be,
to promote his brand. Back in November, a jury unanimously found Bankman-Fried guilty of 7 counts, including conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. Michael Lewis wrote a book on the crypto star's rise and fall and has been in contact with him while detained. He says the man is hardwired for risk.
You put your hand on a hot stove and you don't know to take it off until it's burned to a crisp. He doesn't feel risk.
Now, there is no parole for federal crimes, but good behavior can reduce time served. Bankman-Fried's lawyers will appeal this sentence, and Judge Kaplan recommends he serve in a medium security prison in the Bay Area of Northern California. Nora, that's closer to Bankman-Fried's parents.
Russia escalates its attacks on Ukraine. President Vladimir Zelensky spoke with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson today, telling him it is vital that Congress passes a new military aid package. In an exclusive interview with CBS's Charlie D'Agata on the front lines, Zelensky said Ukraine desperately needs air defense missiles and artillery shells.
Increase the production of... Amid the ruins of a bombed-out building in eastern Ukraine, President Zelensky seemed upbeat despite recent setbacks on the battlefield.
But one thing that strikes me is you're defiant still. You seem more frustrated than optimistic now.
No,
I got that wrong.
Yeah,
you're still optimistic.
No, I'm normal. I'm optimistic because this is only one plan how to survive.
That plan for survival relies on U.S. support, which has helped keep Russian forces at bay in recent months.
It was very hard, but thank God our partners, including the US and Europe, helped us with air defense missiles, so we lived through the winter.
I understand that, but Americans will think we have spent tens of billions of dollars supporting Ukraine.
It would not be right to say we just need another year or $1 billion. It doesn't work like that. Ammunition is coming to us, but its production takes place in the US, and the money stays in the US, and the taxes are staying in the US.
We joined him as he inspected vast, newly built underground bunkers just a few miles from the Russian border. They're also bracing for Russian retaliation after President Putin accused Ukraine of supporting the ISIS terror attack near Moscow last week. Allegations Zelensky dismissed as ridiculous.
But that doesn't stop Putin from attacking Ukraine, right?
Yes, and that's what I want to tell you. For him, he doesn't care what the reason is for attacking us.
President Zelensky told us he believes the Russians are preparing to launch another offensive in May or June, Nora. Ideally, he's hoping for missile defense systems and more artillery before then.
Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much. Back here in the U.S., a 22-year-old Illinois man was charged with murder today in connection with a stabbing rampage that left 4 people dead and 7 others wounded. CBS's Sabrina Franza has more on what happened.
Rockford police say the deadly attack started around 1:15 p.m. on Wednesday.
And I have another call coming in for a possible stabbing.
According to authorities, the suspect, 22-year-old Christian Soto, had just smoked marijuana with his friend, Jacob Schubach. Soto claims it was laced and that he became paranoid and attacked Jacob and his mother, Ramona.
He said he retrieved a knife from the kitchen at Jacob's house and proceeded to stab Jacob and Ramona to death.
Soto then went on a rampage, police say, breaking into homes and attacking people at random. 7 people were injured and 2 more killed, including 15-year-old Jenna Newcomb and postal worker Jay Larson. Craig Garr saw him being attacked in his front yard and called the police.
He just kept stabbing the guy. He had a little knife. I saw the knife. And then he got in his truck, revved it up, ran over to the mailman.
Roughly 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy took Soto into custody. He's now facing multiple felony charges, including first-degree murder. Today, neighbors came together to mourn.
That love and compassion that we see here today, let's carry this out into the rest of our days here in Rockford, because we are better when we are together.
Soto appeared in court briefly today and is being held without bond. His next court date is next week. Nor if convicted, he's facing 60 years for each murder.
Awful story, Sabrina Franza. Thank you. President Biden is in New York tonight with 2 high-powered friends, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, for a star-studded campaign event. For $100,000, you can take a picture with the current and former presidents. CBS's Caitlin Huey-Burns reports on what could be the biggest fundraiser in presidential campaign history.
In New York City tonight, a parade of presidents, headlining an event at Radio City Music Hall that raked in $25 million for Joe Biden's re-election campaign. It's a record for a political fundraiser, bolstering Biden's significant cash advantage, even as he lags behind Donald Trump in the polls.
Kamala and I desperately need your help because, look, there's only about 6 or 7 states that are going to determine the outcome of this election.
The Biden campaign has $71 million in the bank, compared to the Trump campaign's nearly $34 million. Trump's legal troubles have been draining resources. A super PAC supporting him spent $8.5 million on legal fees so far this year, including $5.5 million last month.
A crooked judge shouldn't say, we're going to have you post a bond and take
all of that money that I could be spending on a campaign.
Sarah Briner is a campaign finance expert.
In a race this close, can money move the needle?
Money can definitely move needles in close races. And it's by getting just the smallest fraction of people to think about the race in the way you want them to think about it.
Trump also tried to cash in on the Democrats' fundraising event today, asking for donations to help defeat the Biden-Obama-Clinton cartel. He was in New York today, attending the wake of a fallen NYPD police officer.
Trump stands to benefit financially from his social media company Truth Social going public this week, but that has raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest if he's elected president. Nora?
Caitlin Duyburns, thank you very much. New video of that horrific school bus accident in Texas, a startling admission from the driver of the truck that hit it is next. New details tonight in that school bus crash in Texas last week that killed 2 people, including a 5-year-old. Newly released video from inside the bus shows a concrete truck crossing the double yellow line into its path, causing the bus to swerve and then roll. Court documents show the truck driver admitted he only got 3 hours of sleep the night before, and he took cocaine the morning of the crash. The bus was packed with preschoolers on a trip to the zoo. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.
Tonight, the stunning new images just in as we come on the air. The first look on board the cargo ship that took down the bridge in Baltimore, what the images reveal. The former billionaire sentenced in one of the worst cases of financial fraud in American history, and what has 4 presidents, past and present, in New York tonight. First, that video coming in now aboard the cargo ship that crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. ABC News also getting a close-up look at the twisted steel, the bridge lying across the cargo ship, the massive crane arriving today. What the data recorders reveal about the chilling moments leading up to the catastrophic collision. FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried sentenced to 25 years in prison, guilty of masterminding a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme. The judge ordering him to repay $11 billion to his victims, saying he didn't hear a word of remorse for the crimes. Aaron Katursky outside the courthouse. Tracking storms on both coasts tonight, heavy rain and flood watches from North Carolina to Maine. Back-to-back systems taking aim at the west. Heavy rain and snow from California to Colorado. Rob Marciano times it out. Showing new details about the horrific stabbing rampage across multiple locations in Rockford, Illinois. 4 people killed, including a 15-year-old girl. Her mother says she died protecting her sister and a friend. Alex Perez with new reporting. The race for the White House tonight, President Biden joined by former Presidents Obama and Clinton for a show of force against Donald Trump and a record-breaking $25 million fundraiser at New York's Radio City Music Hall. At the same time, Trump attending a wake for a fallen NYPD officer less than 3 weeks before the start of his criminal trial in Manhattan. Mary Bruce here in New York. Newly released video of the deadly school bus crash in Texas. The bus sideswiped when a concrete truck crossed the center line, knocking the bus onto its side. A Frontier Airlines flight evacuated before takeoff from Charlotte, North Carolina. A strong odor forcing passengers off the plane. Play ball. Major League teams take the field for the start of the new season. And America Strong tonight. The husband going from school to school, honoring his late wife by helping as many children as he can.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this Thursday. I'm Lindsay Davis in for David. Tonight, former cryptocurrency mogul Sam Bankman-Fried sentenced to 25 years in prison in one of the largest financial fraud cases in U.S. history. More on that in a moment. But we begin with the stunning new images just coming in from on board the cargo ship that brought down Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. New images just coming in from the NTSB show inspectors probing the damage, the twisted metal of the bridge draped across the front of the ship. On board, they found 56 containers of hazardous materials, some broken open, spilling into the water. Officials say there is no immediate threat. Our team out on the water today with the Army Corps of Engineers who are leading the recovery operation. Cranes are on the way to clear the debris and tow the ship away, and then to recover the bodies of the 4 missing construction workers trapped underneath. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze on the scene tonight.
Tonight, a first look inside the cargo ship that crashed into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. NTSB investigators combing through the catastrophic damage, collecting evidence, surveying the mangled wreckage and twisted steel encasing the bow of the ship, and examining the hazardous materials on board. A massive operation is now underway to clear the wreckage. The U.S. Navy sending 3 giant cranes to the scene. Officials hoping to refloat the cargo ship Dolly to begin clearing this vital East Coast port.
We're only able to get this close right now because we're with the Army Corps of Engineers. The rest of this water is completely blocked to any other commercial vessels.
We traveled by boat, getting our first up-close look at the mangled metal and debris.
This goes 50 feet down into the water. That needs to get cleared before anything can pass in and out.
1,000 Army Corps of Engineer personnel now supporting the recovery effort.
We have to get that section of bridge that is resting on the front of that vessel off of the vessel.
General Scott Spellman telling me that piece of steel alone weighs nearly 9 million pounds and will need to be cut into sections before it's lifted off, piece by piece, with a crane.
This is one of the largest ports in the United States of America, and it has to get reopened quickly.
Investigators poring over the ship's voyage data recorder, obtaining preliminary information consistent with the power outage and outlining a timeline of the 5 minutes before the disaster. The ship's lights going dark at 1:24 a.m. Tuesday. Alarms ringing out. Within minutes, the pilots calling for tugboats, issuing a mayday, notifying authorities the ship lost power and was heading toward the bridge. First responders stopping traffic on the bridge. Shortly after 1:29 a.m., that collision and collapse heard on the data recorder. Only 2 of the 8 construction workers who were on the bridge survived. Authorities on Wednesday recovered the bodies of 2 of them, 26-year-old Dorleon Castillo and 35-year-old Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes, both found inside a submerged pickup truck. 4 more workers presumed dead, believed to be trapped in the underwater wreckage, including Miguel Luna and Maynor Suazo Sandoval. Sandoval's brother Carlos telling ABC News Maynor had an unbeatable spirit filled with happiness. The Baltimore Orioles today taking time to recognize the victims before their home opener.
Let us join together in a moment of silence for those who lost their lives.
And later in the game, honoring 3 first responders who stopped traffic on the bridge, saving lives.
No doubt saving countless lives. And let's get right to Elizabeth Schulze on the scene there in Baltimore. Elizabeth, what are officials saying about a possible timeline to start clearing out all that wreckage?
Lindsay, recovery crews are working 24/7, and you can see by that new NTSB video just how colossal of a task this is going to be. That's just the damage on the surface of the ship. There are thousands of tons of steel underwater that they're going to have to clear too. Lindsay?
Right, Elizabeth, thank you. Now to the sentencing of former cryptocurrency billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried, a judge handing down a 25-year sentence in one of the largest financial fraud cases this country has ever seen. The 32-year-old, once the poster boy for the currency of the future, is now facing the consequences of old-fashioned crime. Bankman-Fried was convicted in November of diverting billions of dollars of his customers' money to cover his losses in a separate and risky investment scheme. His lawyers had argued for leniency, portraying him as an awkward math nerd. But the judge said he hadn't heard a word of remorse from Bankman-Fried. ABC senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky is at the courthouse tonight.
Just 2 years ago, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried mingled with the rich and powerful. His company's name on sports arenas, ads in the Super Bowl.
It's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
Yeah, I don't think so. But tonight, the one-time king of crypto is off to federal prison for 25 years. Before he was sentenced today, Bankman-Fried apologized for his $11 billion fraud. I made a series of bad decisions, he said. It haunts me every day. But the judge not buying it, noting there was never a word of remorse for the commission of terrible crimes.
You just need FTX.
With celebrity endorsements and Bankman-Fried's guarantees money would be safe, FTX became the premier crypto exchange. It collapsed in late 2022 after Bankman-Fried used billions in FTX customer funds without permission to keep his privately controlled hedge fund, Alameda Research, afloat. At trial, prosecutors playing this ABC News interview.
So you do know, and you did know, that FTX deposits were being funneled to Alameda?
So I was vaguely aware that that was how some wires were being sent in the first place.
Didn't that set off alarm bells in your head?
So there were a lot of people who were involved in that process. And look, I really deeply wish that I had taken a lot more responsibility for understanding what the details were of what was going on there.
In court today, one victim told the judge he lost money I wanted to spend on a family home. The judge saying he received more than 200 letters. A man with 2 young children writing, he lost everything. It was my life savings, and now I am left with nothing. The judge said he wanted Bankman-Fried in prison long enough so he cannot commit another fraud. Otherwise, there is a risk that this man will be in a position to do something very bad in the future, and it is not a trivial risk.
Aaron joins us now live. And Aaron, we know that those 25 years in federal prison aren't the only punishment for Bankman-Fried.
The judge also ordered him to forfeit $11 billion. Now, Lindsay, he doesn't have that, but prosecutors can use assets they've already seized from Bankman-Fried to start to compensate victims. Though, Lindsay, we've heard from so many FTX customers, they're losing hope they'll ever be made whole. Lindsay?
Aaron Katursky for us. Thanks so much, Aaron. Now to the chilling new details of that stabbing spree in a neighborhood in Rockford, Illinois. The rampage lasted just 20 minutes, but left 4 people dead, including a 15-year-old girl. Her mother says she died protecting her sister and a friend. And what investigators say led up to it. Here's ABC's Alex Perez.
Tonight, a close-knit community in northwest Illinois, Rockford, in mourning after police say 22-year-old Christian Soto went on a deadly 20-minute knife rampage, killing 4 people, including a friend's mother, and injuring 7 others.
It was learned that Soto had broken into multiple homes nearby in Rockford, and in doing so, and beat a young woman to death with a bat, stabbed 2 adults to death, and ran over a mailman who died from his injuries.
Investigators tonight revealing those chilling new details, saying Soto told them he was doing drugs with his 23-year-old friend, Jacob Shutback, and that those drugs were allegedly laced with something. The violence beginning at about 1:15 p.m. Wednesday. Soto allegedly grabbing a knife and then, police say, killing his friend and his friend's mother, Ramona Shutback. Soto then, authorities say, taking the horror to other parts of the neighborhood, allegedly killing mail carrier Jay Larson, and breaking into another home, where police say he attacked a group of teenage girls watching a movie, killing 15-year-old Jenna Newcomb. Her mother says she died protecting her sister and friend.
Then you think about these 4. They were doing what we all do. What you should all be doing. It's spring break. You have 3 girls watching a movie? I can't even comprehend that.
Tonight, this emotional community remembering those who were killed.
The worst of times can bring out the best in us.
And Lindsay Soto remains in custody. He's facing 13 charges, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, and home invasion. Lindsay?
Our thoughts certainly go out to those families. Alex, thank you. Now to the storms on both coasts tonight. Heavy rain in the east, flood watches from North Carolina to Maine, and a washout for some Major League Baseball fans on this opening day. Games in Philly and New York postponed until tomorrow. Umbrellas out in front of Boston's Faneuil Hall, but the Red Sox are playing in Seattle tonight. Meantime, back-to-back storms are taking aim at the west as Easter approaches. Let's get to ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano. And Rob, what does it look like for the holiday weekend?
Well, Lindsay, it's getting very active, as you mentioned, in the west for one thing. It's been a big old mess here in the east. We'll see some improvement here soon, but we still have flood watches that are posted for parts of New England and the Mid-Atlantic. That ribbon of rain that's been with us all day long has been slow to move off to the east, but it's trying to do it. It'll be ending from west to east tonight, but hanging around Boston, the Cape, and Maine early tomorrow morning. But you'll get your games in Philly and at Citi Field tomorrow afternoon. Storm number 1 coming into the northwest tonight. Storm number 2 swings into San Francisco. So I-5 from Seattle all the way down to LA will be wet through Saturday morning. And then we're looking at a significant flood risk from Santa Barbara to San Diego through Sunday, and that includes the threat from mudslides, especially in the hills around LA. This system, too, will be slow to move out. Lindsay?
All right, Rob, thank you. Now to the race for the White House and 4 U.S. presidents in New York. President Biden holding a $25 million fundraiser at Radio City Music Hall tonight with some high-profile support from former presidents. Former President Obama hitching a ride to New York on Air Force One with President Biden. He'll be joined by former President Clinton on the stage tonight. Former President Trump also nearby at the wake for a fallen police officer just 3 weeks until the start of his Manhattan criminal trial. ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, here in New York.
Tonight, President Biden calling in the heavy hitters to give his campaign a jolt. Biden and former President Barack Obama touching down today in New York City, teaming up tonight with former President Bill Clinton for what the campaign is touting as a record-shattering fundraiser at Radio City Music Hall. The Biden campaign billing the star-studded night as a massive show of force, a conversation with 3 presidents and musical guests including Lizzo and Queen Latifah. The event expected to rake in an historic $25 million, more money than rival Donald Trump raised all last month. Tickets for the sold-out fundraiser run from $225 to $500,000. Select high-dollar donors can get their photo taken with all three presidents by famed photographer Annie Leibovitz. Outside the event in New York, pro-Palestinian protesters demanding a ceasefire. Biden and Trump are running neck and neck in national polls, with the race now tightening in key battleground states. Trump today making his own visit to New York, invited by the family to the wake of slain NYPD officer Jonathan Diller, a young father gunned down during a routine traffic stop. It comes as Trump is eager to put crime front and center in this election.
We have to stop. We have to get back to law and order. We have to do a lot of things differently because this is not working. This is happening too often.
Now, the Trump campaign is claiming they have their own record-shattering fundraiser coming up next week. They say that will bring in some $33 million, but the former president has already had to spend at least $60 million in political contributions to pay his legal bills. The bottom line here, Lindsay, the Biden campaign is far outraising the Trump campaign as the former president is still being weighed down by his legal woes. Lindsay.
Mary Bruce Forrest in New York today. Thank you, Mary. Former President Trump was also in New York today, but his Georgia election interference case was again before a judge. Trump's lawyers argue the case should be thrown out because the former president is being tried for political speech protected by the First Amendment. Prosecutors responded that Trump's words and actions seeking to overturn the Georgia election were part of a pattern of criminal conduct. No decision from the judge just yet. When we come back, newly released video of the deadly school bus crash in Texas. The school bus sideswiped by an oncoming concrete truck, knocking the bus onto its side. And a Frontier Airlines flight evacuated before takeoff. A strong odor forcing passengers off the plane. Tonight, newly released dashcam video of the deadly school bus collision outside Austin, Texas. Concrete truck crossing the double yellow line. Concrete truck knocking the bus onto its side. And a Frontier Airlines flight evacuated before takeoff. A strong odor forcing passengers off the plane. Tonight, newly released dashcam video of the deadly school bus collision outside Austin, Texas. Video shows a concrete truck crossing the double yellow line, sideswiping the school bus. The bus then rolling onto its side. A 5-year-old child was killed along with an adult in another vehicle. The children were coming back from a field trip to the zoo. Passengers on a Frontier Airline flight bound for Orlando were forced to evacuate moments after boarding in Charlotte, North Carolina. A strong odor filled the plane. Some passengers seen coming down the emergency slide, others using the jet bridge. At least one person was injured on the slide. Authorities are trying to find the source of that odor. When we come back, the new study raising questions about the cost of popular drugs used for weight loss, and the players take to the field for opening day. Tonight, a new study is raising questions about the high cost of the diabetes drug Ozempic and similar drugs now being used by millions of people for weight loss. Drug maker Novo Nordisk charging nearly $1,000 a month for injections before insurance. Researchers from Yale, King's College Hospital in London, and Doctors Without Borders claim that it can be made for less than $5. The study does not account for labor costs, tariffs, and legal fees. The company says it spent almost $5 billion on research and development. And the Major League Baseball season is now underway. Just about every team taking to the field today. The Dodgers' Shohei Ohtani receiving a huge ovation, playing his first home game at Dodger Stadium, overshadowed by the gambling scandal involving his former interpreter. Kansas City Chiefs head coach Andy Reid throwing out the first pitch before the game between the Royals and Twins, and San Francisco Giants pitcher Blake Snell signing autographs before today's game against the Padres. When we come back, the husband going from school to school, honoring his late wife by helping as many children as he can. Finally tonight, America Strong, the husband who lost his wife and what he asked for in lieu of flowers. Tonight, all around Oklahoma, an incredible act of generosity. This man, Sean Cummings, is giving away tens of thousands of dollars to students in need. $1,572.26 to the students at Lexington Public Schools, more than $2,100 to the students at Middale Public Schools, more than $4,200 to Jones Public Schools. All of it to pay off student lunch debts. Sean is doing it to honor his late wife, Kathy, who died last month of cancer. She was a chef and restaurant owner, and instead of flowers at her funeral, Sean asked for donations to help feed children in their community, and the community acted. Tonight, through donations and a GoFundMe, Sean has raised more than $67,000 and has already given away more than $42,000. Just today, Sean taking us with him for his latest donation.
We're getting ready to drop off a check for around $1,500 to pay school lunch debt.
Walking into Tuttle High School in Tuttle, Oklahoma, writing the check to Tuttle Public Schools. School official, Mr. Jeff DeWitt.
The impact that his donation will have for graduating seniors will be profound, and we're truly very thankful.
Teacher, Miss Tommy Marshall.
It lifts a huge weight off their shoulders so that they can better prepare themselves for college, for the workforce, for whatever's next.
Tonight, Sean's donations have already helped 21 schools and school districts and thousands of students, hoping to make his wife and his community proud.
This tragedy struck my life. It didn't have to strike me down. I had the choice of whether I wanted to do something great with it or whether I wanted to sit and kind of wallow in my pity. I hope you all get to choose to do something great with yours.
What a great spirit, Sean, and a wonderful message for us all. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Lindsay Davis for David and all of us here. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Moore, America's most watched newscast.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.